Morning. Welcome to the Trending Economic Issue segment of the Business of God Live show with me, Winston Tackie. Today we'll be discussing very important trending economic issues across Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire as well. It appears that the issue concerning the confidence and environment where businesses can thrive and also where prospects in terms of where investors looking out to see where they invest their money. It appears Ghana has happened to come to the 9th position in terms of the economic prospect indicators in Africa, where Cote d'Ivoire is the first, and also Nigeria, which initially in 2015 was the first, toppled to come to the 4th position. So we'll be discussing this and many more on the Trending Economic Issue segment. With me in the studio to discuss is Mr. Emmanuel Amoah Darkwah. He's an economist and is also joining us right here on the Business Africa Live show. Mr. Emmanuel, good morning. How are you doing?
Fine, yourself?
I'm doing great myself.
Now,
it appeared, before we come to the issue, it appears that it's been 2 years now ever since the issue of Bring Back Our Girls, the Chibok girls who were abducted in the senior high school, and it became a national issue. So in light of that, we'll still be pushing for Bring Back Our Girls. Yesterday, a video came out on BBC and also international media channels as well as BTA concerning the state of the Chibok girls. It appears they are still alive, and so yes, this is a very trending economic issue. So yes, if you are home and you're still pushing for that, you can still hashtag it on Twitter and also across all social networks concerning Bring Back Our Girls. And definitely, we hope these young girls come back to meet their families, because the families are still under the woes of missing their children. So, Mr. Man, before we come to the issue of economic dimension of the trending economic issue, this issue of Boko Haram and the Bring Back Our Girls.
sure.
Do you see the government of Nigeria, the military, making effort? Because that was one promise that was being made by Buhari as soon as he came into power.
Okay, good morning to your viewers, wherever they are watching us from. Before even that, let us show our flags to solidarity to our neighboring Nigerians and what has happened to them. Today is exactly 2 years that we had these girls abducted in school, and 276 of them. It's a sad news, but Nigerian military over the past 1 year has done quite well, but I would say that there's still room for improvement. Recently, they were able to, embark on some airstrikes in Borno State, where Boko Haram is very predominant there. So they've been able to cut their supplies, and there's also a national military joint task force at play, and which brought military men from Nigeria, Chad, Niger, and to fight these jihadist group. And so they are doing quite well, but I think more needs to be done. Especially, I remember a statement that His Excellency Buhari made last year, that before we can say we've won the battle against Boko Haram, we should bring back our girls. And so it's a top priority issue that the president wants to see these girls come back to their families. And so the issue of terrorism, especially in the sub-region, has become an issue of concern. And even in Ghana here, I was listening to you when you were doing an intro, whereby in Ghana people are living in fear and all that. The issue of terrorism and security threat is very crucial, looking at what has happened in the past, in the last few months in West Africa. A serious attack on Mali, Burkina, and then in recent times it was in Cote d'Ivoire, Grand Bassam, which was very terrible. And so the threat it's still on. But I say that the fight against terrorism is an intelligent battle anyway, even though we have traditional security measures like, strengthening security at your border posts and all that. It's good, but we also have to look at the intelligence angle of those security intelligence, so that we'll be able to curb this menace.
All right. One would say that should you submit to fear, indirectly means you are submitting to the battle of terrorism and therefore making it obvious that they've won over us. Don't submit to fear. Be contentious, be confident, and know and believe in the security system of the country, and definitely the battle will be won. So should you have any information, you can kindly convert to the police and also call on the emergency number, which is 18555, 18555. That is 18555. And definitely your plight and comments or information will help solve these security menace that the nation is facing. Now we come to business, and also according to the African prospect indicators, where should investors decide to prospect across Africa, it appears Cote d'Ivoire happens to be the place to be, considering the economic stability. So at the moment they are first on the table, where should investors come in, because they have a stable environment and the macroeconomic indicators seem to favor most business investors. And Ghana has come to the position of to the 9th position, and as well as Nigeria, which initially was in the 15th position, now which initially was in the 1st position in 2015, is at the moment the 4th position. So this is a very good analysis being brought up according to a report recently. So discussing this issue in the studio. So now we'll come to the indicators. Ghana, one would say, had a lot of challenges in 2015. So, but in 2016, it appears that most indicators seem to favor the business climate, considering the fact that the energy has been restored, but at a higher price, because businesses are now complaining because they happen to spend more in terms of production, and also in terms of ensuring that the produce reach the market at higher prices. And also the kind of climate, because it appears the political risk going into election is something that investors will look up to. But concerning Cote d'Ivoire, they just came out of a very disturbing the civil war situation in that country, and it appears everything falls in line with them. What has attributed to that?
They've really done well, because when I look at Cote d'Ivoire now, at the time in 2011, growing around negative 4.4% in 2011, but now they are growing around 9%. Ghana in 2014 was doing around 14%, but now growing around 4%. So you look at these two examples, these are neighbors, and we can make that example, we can make that comparison. And so if you look at what is going on in Cote d'Ivoire, and then the report as it states, you look at economic, that's the macroeconomic indicators, and then you look at political risk, you look at security, you look at the operational, you look at the legal. Those are the various things that this report would want to consider. When we talk about macroeconomic indicators in Cote d'Ivoire, how favorable are they as compared to that we have in Ghana here? If you look at inflation, if you look at interest rates, if you look at exchange rate, if you look at public debt, you look at all those macroeconomic indicators, are they favorable to business? Cost of electricity, power, water, whatever that we need to, in the factors of production. If you look at all those factors, you'll be able to assess whether one nation is favorable to the other. And so the report really shows that yes, Cote d'Ivoire has done really well, and it's a country I'm also proud of, because coming out of a civil war in just about 5 years, and they've been able to transform their economy. That means that there's something going on. So they've done very well, and they need recommendation.
According to the World Bank, it appears that the growth acceleration of the sub-Saharan Africa has reduced from 4.5% to 3.3%. That's projection in 2016. And considering the gradual development and, let's say, initiative and policies being put in place by most African countries, it appears change and transformation is not as fast and paced as is being expected.
Sure, because African economies, most of them are commodity exporting. If you look at the largest economy in Africa, Nigeria, exports oil. If you look at Angola, they also export oil. And even our own Ghana, we export oil. And so once there is a plunge in these commodity prices, what we see is that those countries would suffer. If you go to Angola now, they've called for a bailout from the IMF. If you go to Nigeria, they've also gone for a loan of about 6 billion from China, and they are even looking out for more because they want to bridge their budget deficit of about $11 billion. And so if you look at all these countries, and we are all dependent on commodities, and so when the commodity prices are falling, all of us are suffering. And so that's why the projection by the IMF, by the World Bank, has declined from 4.4 to about 3.3. And we also look at global growth in general. Global growth, it's expected to fall because, first of all, we look at one of the giants, that is China, is suffering, and there is a slowdown, and it's affecting all of us, especially countries in sub-Saharan Africa, because all of us, most countries in sub-Saharan Africa, we do business with China. And so once their economy suffers from a slowdown, we also suffer at the end. And so that is what is happening. Looking at oil prices, they've fallen about 67% since January 2015 to December 2014 to December 2015. That means that yes, there's been a plunge in all those commodity prices. Talk about gold, talk about copper, talk about all those, export from sub-Saharan Africa. The prices have gone down over the period, and so growth would, go down. This calls for diversification of our economies. We have been exporting all these materials in their raw form for how many years now? So once there is a plunge in these prices on the world market, we suffer, and that is what is going on now, leading to the, projections being revised downwards.
All right. Now let's come to Nigeria at the moment, in which at the moment the economy seems to be having a lot of challenges, because the first 100 days of Buhari's office, the first thing that he prioritized was tackling corruption, which has been a major case, and also dealing with the security menace of Boko Haram. So looking at this, it appears that he didn't focus much on standing on the economy, having a strong economy fundamentals that will push growth. In other ways, that will be able to make sure that things are available for people to have businesses flourishing, like electricity, power, fuel, which at the moment is as scarce in Nigeria. Amidst that, the Chinese government has decided to give $6 billion loan to support the Nigerian infrastructure deficit, which you initially mentioned of going above 11.6 billion US dollars. All this being said, does Nigeria need a structural reform that will strengthen their currency and also strengthen their economy?
Sure, they need a reform. You look at African economies, they all have similar challenges, and what happens in Ghana is quite similar in what happens in Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, Angola, whatever, and the other countries you can talk about. That is Africa's largest economy we are talking about, with a population of 170 million. And so there's a large market. But what is happening in Nigeria now is that they depend so much on crude oil revenues, which have fallen over the years. And so crude oil prices going down about 67% over a period of 1 year or so. And then it's now bouncing back, but it's slow. We can't make projections now because there are so many factors that will lead the prices to come up again. And so if you look at these deficits, Buhari's budget for 2016, or Nigeria's budget, has a deficit of about 11.1 billion. And they are looking at raising revenue to bridge the deficit gap that they are having in their budget. And so before even he traveled to China, there were speculations that he was going to sign a $2 billion loan. But it turns out that yes, it's 6 billion now. It's a lot of money. We don't know the terms and conditions now, so we can't, comment on that. But I remember latter part of last year at FOCA conference in Johannesburg, China's president Xi Jinping promised that he's going to give Africa $60 billion, dollars. And I don't know whether this is part of what we are talking about in loans, and then about 5 billion in interest-free loans. And so I don't know whether this 6 billion forms part of what China promised to Africa. I think China has trade relations between China and Africa has been growing, and cooperation between the two has also been growing. Bilateral relationship has grown over the years, and so it's a step in the right direction. Even Nigeria was looking out for raising what we call panda bonds in China.
That is one thing I also want to come on, because at the same meeting, Buhari signed an agreement to have a transaction where most of the denomination of foreign reserves are going to be in China, the Chinese yuan currency. So would that sustain, would that give a booster to the currency, naira?
Yes.
Or considering what happens in the United States in terms of the interest rate?
To some extent, because if you look at the currencies that countries price their reserves in, traditionally it has been the dollar, the euro, and I think the yen. But China last year was able to, by World Bank and IMF, was able to say that yes, countries can also price their their reserves in their yuan, so that you don't put a lot of pressure on the dollar. Because if you go to Nigeria now, if you look at what we call the black market rate and what the central bank is also quoting, the difference is too wide. And one of the things is that we have this black market price not reflecting what is by the central bank has given out, and so it puts a lot of pressure on the dollar naira exchange rate. And so they think that they've been able to sign an agreement that you can price your reserves in yuan. So that means that you don't put a lot of pressure on the the currency, the exchange rate of the naira and then the dollar. I think last 2 years, when Ghana was also facing that same challenge, there were so many calls for Ghana to also consider the yuan as being one of the currencies that we can price our net reserves in. And Nigeria has been able to sign, the Central Bank of Nigeria and that of China, they've been able to sign an agreement that people can also trade with yuan in China, in Nigeria. What it means is that you don't put a lot of pressure on the exchange rate between the dollar and the naira, as we've seen in the past. So I think it's a step in the right direction, but it has its own advantages and disadvantages.
Now, talking about advantages, we saw Zimbabwe do the similar thing. There's a devaluing their currency in terms of transaction with the dollar. So dollar is very operational in Zimbabwe, and 5 years down the lane, we've seen what is happening to the banks in Zimbabwe, which is at the moment is struggling seriously because their currency, is devalued and has no value at the moment. So, looking at what Nigeria started amidst a weak economy, how detrimental is it going to have on their fundamentals?
Now, you see, the depreciation of naira has been phenomenal in Nigeria. I don't have the rate on my head. I can't quote right now, but it has fallen, and naira to dollar rate, and the difference. What makes it so revealing is that you look at the black market rate, that is the power market, and then that of what is going on, what is being quoted by the central bank. The difference is too much. And so there have been so many calls on the central bank to devalue the naira because they think that naira is not, the economy is not being supportive of the naira. One of the reasons is that net reserves has fallen because of the dwindling of oil prices on the global market. And so there's been so much pressure that devalued the naira to reflect what is going on in Nigeria's economy. But Nigeria has not been able to do that as of now. And so they think that, yes, going for yuan and letting people trade in yuan to, release the tension or relieve the tension that is on, or the excessive pressure that is on the CD and the dollar rates. I think it's a step in the right direction, looking at the trade volumes also that exist between the two countries. And so I think it's a step in the right direction.
Still on Nigeria, one comment that was made recently by Muhammad Buhari, the president of Nigeria, was concerning the trade imbalances between Nigeria and China. It appears the market of Nigeria to the Chinese government is always seen as a consumer market, and so it appears that all their producers they rather come to be consumed in China. But now, Buhari wants to change the scope into making sure that the Chinese government and that of Nigeria, the economy, is rather seen to be competitive in terms of production. So should there be any means, most of the manufacturing segment or manufacturing lines are supposed to start up in Nigeria. So at least there will be 50-50 kind of trade balances. Do you think that will something that can see the light of day?
Yeah, the call is a good call in the right direction, looking at the trade imbalance, not only Nigeria, the whole of Africa. Look at the volumes of trade that exist between us and China. Who is benefiting the most? All because Africa traditionally have been sending our produce. We know this thing, we were taught even in primary school, that we've been exporting raw materials. And so if you look at the value of these raw materials and when they are being processed, the value of those goods, you are going to get a trade imbalance. That means that the volumes of your exports and then that of imports, when you compare, China is making that headways and that gains. And so it's a step in the right direction. But it's about time that Africans, we see trade to be with other, continents and countries to be beneficiaries, whereby we'll be able to ask them to also set up in our on our continent, so that you'll be able to bring jobs here. Because once you are importing the goods from other countries, you are creating jobs elsewhere. And look at the level of unemployment we have on the continent. I recently read a report that about 50% graduates don't get jobs, and that is a serious issue that we are talking about. How do we tailor our policies so that people will get jobs after school, so that we help them also establish their companies here, create jobs here for our people to do? I think that one is very good. But it also boils down to how favorable your macroeconomy is, and the other factors I have mentioned: security, political, legal, and then on top of all, the macroeconomic stability you have in your country. These are the factors that we have to work to, so that you'll be able to attract people to, or businesses to set up in your country, create jobs, pay taxes, and then we all
among the factors that you just make listed of, which are more efficient, or which is more efficient?
Economic and political comes top, yes. Looking at what is happening now, but I think economic and political comes top. Though legal issues, operational issues are very critical. I'm not going to choose any ahead of any, but I think that economic and then political, because if any investment should thrive, you should look at the economic indicators at the time, political indicators at the time, because we don't want tension. No, businessman would want to set up in a chaos environment. Nobody would want to do that. So which boils down to security issues. So I think for security, some countries in Africa, they are doing very well. We have some that they are not doing quite well. But for security, I think it's crucial to development, crucial to investment in the sub-region.
Okay, well said there by Mr. Emmanuel Amoah Darkwah. Now we come to Ghana, where the issue of economic partnership agreement between the government of Ghana and also some of the ECOWAS countries and the European Union has come into light, considering the huge tariff increment that will come into play should, as at 1st of October 2016, an agreement is not being signed. It will lead to high terms of payments, in terms of exchange between these two countries. So this is something that businesses and commerce have been complaining about, and therefore are calling for most governments to subscribe to the EPA, which will boost trade between the European government and also most of the governments in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we're going to discuss this issue right here on the Business Africa Live show on the Trending Economic segment on BTA. So now looking at Ghana, which initially there was great debate as to do or not to do, to sign or not to sign.
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of experts coming to contend with this agreement, because they say government is going to lose a lot of revenue in terms of interest, in terms of taxes upon the goods that are going to come from the European Union.
Sure.
Now, comparatively, what advantage can we get from signing on to this agreement?
EPAs, it's been an issue since 2000, when the European Union and ACP countries, even before that, but in recent times, 2000. So we are looking at trade liberalization, whereby trade will be able to go on between these two markets, so that it will also future goal of leading to what we call a free trade area. A trade area whereby you don't have barriers to trade. We talk about quotas, we talk about tariffs, we talk about all the other regulations that makes trade go on between two markets. And I think it's a good thing, but Ghana should look at the benefits. I always say that I'm not a trade expert anyway, but what I can say is that it's about the volumes of what you are exporting and what you are importing, and what is the value of what you are exporting and what you are importing. If you're able to make that analysis, I know that people are saying that tariffs will go up and all that, but let's juxtapose that against the taxes that government will also be losing. And by the end of the day, we'll be able to say that it is good. At the regional level, ECOWAS, there's been a lot of discussions, because ECOWAS also, want to enter into a free trade area. And so one of the things that we were able to do this year is that we implemented the common external tariffs, which means that if you are bringing any goods up outside of West Africa, it attracts the same tariff. So if you go to Gambia, Senegal, Cameroon, Burkina, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, wherever, the same tariffs applies to, you know, those goods coming in. But I've always said that trade between ourselves as Africans has not been that buoyant, and that is what we have to work at.
I think that is something that was almost coming to, because it appears that we've not even strengthened our integrational trade, trade between ourselves. So because what we've seen is diversifying, let's say breaking into pacts. You see in the East African region, tripartite region, where they've created an economy, and the West African sub-region created an economy. But trade between most countries, it appears the market is not quite open for integration.
That is what the AU, the ECOWAS, the regional bodies we have here in Africa should do. Because if you look at trade amongst ourselves as Africans, it's nothing to write home about as compared to trade between Americans, trade between Europeans, trade in Asia, and all the other markets you talk about. In West Africa, we have a population of around 330 million. This is a huge market. Can we trade amongst ourselves? Even though people will say that there are so many arguments that say that we virtually have the same export. Ghana exports cocoa, Cote d'Ivoire also exports cocoa, Cameroon also exports cocoa. But have we thought of how do we add value, diversify our various economies so that we can trade amongst ourselves? Trade barriers even in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, is even a thing. It's even a challenge. And so I think ECOWAS should work at how do we get it right here in West Africa. There is a large market we have here. How do we make good use of the large market? We have 54 countries in Africa. How can't we trade amongst ourselves? We have to eliminate the barriers to trade so that we'll be able to trade amongst ourselves. Because if you're able to trade amongst yourself, you create jobs. There are lots of investment that do also stay here. And it is very crucial for economic development. You can't talk about economic development without talking about trade. All the very things that we have been exporting in West Africa, it's virtually the same. How can we add value? How can we diversify?
So could it be because we've simplified the discussion to always make it look like if we don't trade, we're going to lose revenue, and we're going to lay people off? Is it just simplified to that extent? Is it something
no. It has to be extended. The argument needs to be extended.
Because we've always simplified this conversation, the same routine for the past how many years? I'm going to tell you. That's
the thing. And so if we're able to carry the arguments to mean that what is the size of market we have in Africa here? How can we make good use of the Africa? I recently heard of a news report that even Ghanaians who are, going to do business in Burkina Faso, I mean the cargo cars, they are saying that they've implemented a tariff or whatever, and so Ghanaian drivers, they are just in Ouagadougou, they've been there for the past 3 weeks. Trade between even Ghana and Burkina Faso, we've not been able to eliminate the trade barriers. I think African governments and the ECOWAS should think about how we eliminate trade barriers in the sub-region. We trade amongst ourselves, 330 million. It's a huge market. Looking at even Nigeria alone with about 170 million people. And so it's a huge market. If we're able to, develop the market well, we can trade amongst us. I'm not saying that economic partnership agreements are not good. There are advantages. But I think the arguments should also be carried to
what do you say of the argument that also comes out of this particular part concerning supporting infant industries, making sure that they are strong? Because should governments, like you made mention of trade between African countries, some will say, I'm protecting my infant industry, so the produce that you're bringing to my country, we already can produce it. So keep yours, let me keep mine. How can we create a healthy competition for us to know that, yes, you can also trade within my country, likewise as I do? Definitely, in other ways, we can import or export outside our continent.
There are comparative advantages to every country, and so some countries can do better in production of other goods than the others. Ghana, we can produce cocoa. I'm not sure America, they can grow cocoa. If you go to Italy, maybe they are good in, these exotic apples. I'm not sure you can go here. So all of us have comparative advantages. But if you look at these comparative advantages, that is where you formulate your trade policies in that line, so that trade will be beneficial to all the very countries that we envisage of trading with. And that is the thing that we have to look at. Because we can't just say that, yes, we have, the market or the export the export of most African countries are the same, so we can't do anything about it. That shouldn't be the case. But let's look at the comparative advantages of all countries. Let's look at what we can produce best at a lower cost, so that we will be able to trade amongst ourselves. Because if you look at trade, you are something that maybe you are importing from China, if it should be produced in Africa, it can be relatively cheaper, but it also has some other, as I've said earlier on, if you look at the economic indicators, if you have power, if you have, favorable interest rates and all that, you'll be able to, produce those goods comparatively cheaper than if you are importing from China. And let me say this, no country in the world developed by just opening up for the world, because they can't compete. The reason why most Ghanaian companies are not able to compete is that you have that high rate of electricity. You have interest rates also high, inflation also high. How do you expect somebody who is also producing in, let's say, China, borrowing around 3% or 5%? How do you expect to be competitive as that person? So people say that, okay, and then let me go and import from China, because when I produce the goods here, it will be relatively higher, and you can't stay in business. Those are some of the things that we talk about. If you want to talk about trade, if you want to talk about trading amongst ourselves as Africans, those are some of the things that we have to consider, so that we resolve those issues, trade amongst ourselves.
So you're saying instead of dealing it from sentimental perspective, we should know that this is business, and therefore profit movement is something that people prioritize.
Sure. Profit, every businessman goes into business to
now,
make profit.
you've really made quite revealing and insightful analysis of the African perspective. Now let's go to the European perspective. And the European markets, what do they tend to benefit? Because it appears they have the largest economy, and the trade between the European Union and the African unions and Africa, it appears to be very huge. Very huge. Very huge. So yes, to them, what do they tend to benefit, since they would rather not pay much in terms of exporting their produce into African continent?
It's all about what they are exporting here into Africa. If you look at those values that we are talking about, Africa will not benefit. That is the fact. If somebody is exporting just, cocoa beans, and somebody is also bringing electronic goods, which of them is expensive? If I am bringing these tablets from, from London or UK, maybe it costs 800 Ghana cedis. I'm also exporting a bag of cocoa around, I think, 3.5 or so, 350. So it's about the value of the export that we are talking about. Looking at the values that we are talking about between, African markets and then that of Europe, we don't. The fact is that we will not be able to benefit unless we're able to add value to what we are exporting, so that we'll be able to, gain, some substantial amounts of money from our exports. Otherwise, we'll not be able to, benefit. We also have to look at what are the things that we are exporting to Europe. What is the future of those things that we are exporting? If you export pineapple to Europe and you think that, yes, because of that we should go for EPA, what about somebody also importing electronic goods which are more expensive than apples? Those are some of the things that we have to look at. I think volumes are very important. As I've said already, comparative advantage is very crucial. But also let's look at what we can also add value to, so that we increase the export prices of those things, and we'll be able to make some gains from trade.
Should agreement be signed or not be signed?
That's a very difficult question, I must say. But I think the trade ministry, Ghana has gone for the interim, and we signed the interim agreement in 2007, and it was implemented in 2008. We have seen that export revenues to Europe has increased because of this agreement. But I think the argument should be carried further to know what we stand to gain when we open up our market. 75% is what we are talking about. Will we be able to compete? That is the crucial question that the Ministry of Trade, Finance, and all stakeholders should consider. And then even at the regional bloc, the ECOWAS.
As an economist, do you see the reason for us to sign this agreement? Like I said, should agreement be signed or not be signed? Your analysis.
Oh no, I don't have the statistics now
I give you the mandate for a legitimate opinion. So should it be signed or not be signed?
Oh, Winston, I think we should look at the volumes. Yes, it has advantages and disadvantages, but what are we exporting? That is the thing. That what are the volumes of what we are exporting as compared to opening up our market to that extent? I know EPAs are good, trade liberalization is very good for any economy, but I think we should, trade experts, maybe one day invite a trade expert, let the person do an analysis of the figures, and we'll be able to make a judgment on that. I wouldn't want to stay here and then I don't have the figures now, and I wouldn't be able to say that Ghana should sign or not to sign, but I've already laid the facts there that these are some of the things that we have to consider in order for us to sign or not to sign.
As I said, I gave him a legitimate opinion for him to decide why he chose or not to. So this is a very insightful analysis that he's giving us concerning the EPA. So you're watching the Trending Economic Issue segment of the Business of Africa Live show. With me today to discuss was Mr. Emmanuel Amoah Darkwah. Mr. Emmanuel, thank you for making time.
Okay.
For God and country, I have to say.
Yes, that is. But before even we leave the set, let me say that yes, this is a continent we love. We are quick to go out for loans and all that, but we have illicit flows, more than 50 or 60 billion dollars annually. Why don't we block the loopholes here so that we'll be able to save more for our continent? This is the only continent that we have. We have a lot of young people here. How do we create opportunities for them to be, achieve their God-given potential, which is very key to every human being. I think we have to work for our continent, and thanks for the good work you're also doing for the continent.
Thank you.
God bless.
Okay then. Thanks for watching the Trending Economic Issue segment of the Business of Africa Live show. The next segment, Stay and Stake, as Winifred brings you the Titan segment, and this is going to be exceptional. Make sure that you stay tuned, and you can also get us also on www.businesstvafrica.com and the first digital box, and you can stream us live on the internet as well. Stay tuned and stay. We'll be right back.